Ladies and gentlemen, Geraldo Rivera.
I've got a crush on you, sweetie pie, all the day and night time.
I've had a crush on her for decades.
Hear me sigh.
First lady of rock, the queen of rock. She sold over 100 million records worldwide. The one and only Linda Ronstadt joins us. How are you, Linda?
Pretty good.
I remember so happily meeting you backstage. Cheech introduced us, but really I've been a fan since the Troubadour days.
Well, thank you so much. That's so nice of you to say.
And you've had such an amazing career. That was just from the American Songbook, but you've had so many different genres, so many different platinum-selling albums, and also, you know, this is Hispanic Heritage Month, and you've all done us so proud with the, the Alma Awards, and you're extolling the virtue of your father's Mexican musical past. How have you chosen your direction with so many different ways to go, and you do it all so brilliantly?
Well, what I really wanted to show in the book was that I had this, I sang a lot of different kinds of music. Maybe there were other people that sang each kind better than I did, but I covered them all. I mean, I covered at least the ones that, were authentic to me, and that I didn't really try to do anything that wasn't in my childhood home before the age of 10. So all that diversity was really already present in my childhood. I had kind of a musical family growing up, and in those days, people did their own music a lot more. They didn't delegate to professionals. They did their own singing, dancing, and playing.
The book is Simple Dreams. It's a musical memoir. I've been reading it last evening and this morning. It's a very, very touching book. It's an autobiography. It's more about music than about your various high-profile social situations. But I'll get to that. Now, your dad, tell me about your family ethnically. Now, your dad is Mexican-American.
Right.
And your mom is an Anglo, I guess you'd say. And so how did that infuse your music?
Well, it gave me, again, more, cross currents. Actually, most of the music came from my dad. My mom was a big fan of Gilbert and Sullivan, and she liked ragtime, and she liked a lot of different stuff. And both my mom and my dad liked standards. But my dad was the one, that loved opera, loved jazz, loved Mexican music, loved American standards, loved it all. He was extremely musical and a wonderful singer. He had a beautiful voice. And so he would either be singing and playing on his guitar, or he'd be playing some record that he brought in Mexico and brought us back from Mexico or Portugal or Spain or, places that he had traveled.
You talk about Gilbert and Sullivan. I track your career. I'm from the Stone Ponies days, through all of the rock and we'll play your music. We've been playing it all day. But then you also came to town. You came to New York, and you're in the Pirates of Penzance, Gilbert and Sullivan operetta. You've done so many of those. I mean, you love the musical theater as well.
Well, the hardest thing was playing in those huge arenas, those places that are not designed for music, big sporting arenas. That was discouraging. I didn't feel like the audience was getting their money's worth, and I didn't feel like I was getting a chance to do what I could do artistically because the sound is difficult and there's a lot of distraction. I really wanted to be in a real theater, the way the Greeks had originally envisioned it with the proscenium, which helps focus the audience's attention onto the stage. Time you hit the stage in a real theater, a lot of your work is done for you. You can just get down to the business at hand. You don't have to worry about winning the audience's attention back from the beer or the hot dog or the joint they're passing, whatever they're trying to get done there in that stadium.
Linda Ronstadt, my very special guest, she has a new book out called Simple Dreams, a musical memoir. It's very touching, and you talk some about the old days with Jim Morrison and all the way to the famous relationship with the once and current governor of California, Jerry Brown. And you really you basically devote a page to describing your relationship with Governor Brown, and it's not that you tell tales out of school, but that was really a sincere relationship that happened at that time, the first time, between two of the highest profile people in the country. How'd you manage that? How'd you manage to manage that?
Well, there was a lot more privacy in those days before the internet. We had a pretty quiet life. Our relationship was pretty quiet. It was pretty low-key, but we liked each other. We had a lot of fun together. we moved on. We never really broke up, particularly. We just went to different places of our lives. He went to India to work with Mother Teresa, and I went to New York to work with Joe Papp at the Public Theater. An also great humanitarian, Joe Papp, because he brought art to millions of people that wouldn't have had access to it, especially Shakespeare, which he was willing to do for just everybody, free in the park with mixed race casts, which was unusual in those days. I'm a great admirer of Joe Papp.
Of Joe Papp, of Jerry Brown. What about Jim Morrison?
Well, that was my first big rock and roll tour that I ever did, and it was kind of shocking for me, in a lot of ways. I mean, he was a troubled individual. I don't want to tell his story. I think that, it's for other people to do, or maybe it would have been for Morrison himself to do. But, he was a troubled guy, and it was my first exposure to the strange kind of narcissism that happens when people in a rock and roll audience might project their own image onto, the star that's singing up there, and it becomes this kind of narcissistic frenzy, which I think is threatening to the person that's performing. And I saw him kind of trying to deal with that, in his troubled way. It was really interesting, but it was sad.
So you're that arc now, 4 decades later, 2009. Why did you stop performing?
Well, I didn't know it, but I had developed Parkinson's disease, and I think it may have happened. It's hard to tell, but I think I may have been struggling with it for the last 10 or 12 years. It was slow coming on, but it tends to go in your voice first. So I started struggling with singing, and I tried to recraft the way I sang. I tried to reinvent the way I could do it, but it just really wasn't possible after a certain point in time because you don't have the muscular control,
So what happened? I mean, after a diagnosis, did you make a conscious decision that you're going to hang it up, or what happened?
Because I was not able anymore, and then a couple of years later, I found out that I had Parkinson's disease. It was very recent that I found out. It was only about 8 months ago.
Have you ever talked to Michael J. Fox about it?
I haven't, but I had an email from him. He's been very nice in sort of reaching out. I don't really know him. I know his brother-in-law slightly, and I've had some emailing back with him, back and forth. Michael Pollan, who wrote, by the way, my favorite book of the last several years, which is called The Botany of Desire. So if you're in the bookstore buying mine, get that one too, The Botany of Desire. But I don't know. It's a new life, and it's a long, strange journey, I'm sure, and I'm starting to learn as much as I can about it. And, Michael J. Fox has done a fabulous job trying to inform the public what this disease is and what might be required to control it or to maybe even cure it, which the most promising therapy seems to be fetal stem cells, and that research is being blocked by a Congress that seems to want to do nothing, and a Congress of science deniers on the right, unfortunately. And they're blocking the kind of legislation and funding that could really make a huge difference to people with not only Parkinson's disease but diabetes, which is a huge killer, across the country. And there are a lot of different therapies that research could apply to.
Linda Ronstadt, my very special guest, the queen of rock, the cover of Time magazine, Rolling Stone a half a dozen times, 100 million records sold. So where do you live now, and what's your family situation?
Well, I live in San Francisco with my 2 children who are growing up now. My son is just moving out now in with his college girlfriend. And my daughter is still at home with me. She's partially moved out. She has her own little cottage on my property. And, I'm just dealing with that transition. It's really a kind of a touching thing when kids, are no longer dependent on you and they're striking out in their little independent way, but they're not really ready to fly yet. So that's what we're dealing with.
Do they hear you sing? Do you still sing at home?
Well, I don't sing at home. I don't sing at all. I'm not able, unfortunately.
I'm so sorry.
That because 90% of the singing I did do was in private. Only about 1% of it was on stage. So I have to say I miss singing, but it's just not a thing I'm going to get to do anymore. I have to find other ways to make myself useful. Maybe I'll learn how to draw.
Well, you've written a heck of a book. It's beautiful, and I wish you all the best with it. You've given us so much pleasure. I mean, even just today, playing your music has been such fun, and I want everyone to get it. Simple Dreams, a musical memoir by Linda Ronstadt. Thank you so much for being with me, Linda.
Thank you so much. You are so nice, and I appreciate it.
And we wish you the very best. We do.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So sad to be deprived. The human race deprived her voice forever.
Yeah. And, we hadn't heard from her in a long time.
I guess that's why. Well, she's only been diagnosed 8 months. She's been sort of retired for, I'd say, 5 years or thereabouts.